here today with Andrew de Silva from David Miller Architects, otherwise known as Das. Okay to call you Das for today?
Perfect to call me Das, yeah.
Good, so I only know you as Das, so that's quite lucky. So we're here today in central Soho, very short walk from your offices in Foley Street, is that right?
Yeah, Fitzrovia.
Fitzrovia,
yeah.
And you've been there for some time?
Yeah, sometime. I'm in over 10 years now in that particular office.
Okay.
But in the area since sort of 2005, I think.
Okay, excellent. So it's a nice studio you got there.
Thank you.
Good architect studio. You walk in, it looks like an architect studio. It's got all the right things there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we like that one. Holds good parties as well, I understand.
Karaoke booth is obviously the main thing. Yeah.
For lunchtime.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for coming in.
No, thank you for having me.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how obviously you and I have worked together for many, many years. So we'll talk a bit about that and the experiences we've had on projects. A little bit where you see DMA and architecture going in the future.
Yeah.
Would be good to cover. So although the business is based in London, the main business, you're obviously based in Liverpool, is that correct?
Yeah, so essentially David Miller, he's from Liverpool originally.
Okay.
And so I guess I started, I got to know David and Fiona, who are the two co-owners, back in 2006 or so, because my friend Jeannie worked with David and Fiona.
Okay.
And I was at university with her.
Yeah.
So that's how I got introduced to David and Fiona. And I started around 2007 after finishing sort of the masters at Westminster University, but about 5 years ago we looked to open another office and looking geographically at some of the northern cities, but it made sense to kind of be based in Liverpool, not just because of David's knowledge and background and personal connection, but also Anna, who's the Liverpool director. She is from the Isle of Man, family from Wirral.
Okay.
And lives there. So she went to set it up, and then I went to relocate about 4 or 5 years ago, as she was going on maternity leave. So I kind of went there to help look after the office. Okay,
good. So that was kind of COVID. Early COVID.
Just before COVID, yeah. So I literally got stuck in Liverpool in COVID. But actually that was quite nice because I got to walk all the streets and get to know Liverpool better.
Yeah, quite a good time, yeah.
Otherwise I would have just gone A to B. So we're nice. We've got an office in on the Albert Dock. And there's 4 of us in the team in Liverpool and about 20 in the London office. So,
So good numbers, numbers. So obviously the London work and the Liverpool work is somewhat different, would you say, or similar type sectors, if not different projects?
We work within as one team across the offices. So really moving team members depending on the pushes and pulls of the projects. A lot of our projects are still in London as we're getting established. But in Liverpool, I think we want to do more work which is more centred around social community aspects. Be a little bit more selective where we can, but actually Liverpool itself is got a lot of a big push in terms of like the science, the life sciences. The universities are there, so there's a lot of 3 major universities. So higher education is a very important sector, housing generally, and education. So we want to still work along the key sectors. Yeah, but I think we can be a little bit more socially minded as well.
Okay, that's good.
So maybe one of the projects we are working there with is the Clare House Children's Hospice, and that's currently got its main headquarters in the Wirral, on the other side of the Mersey River. But they bought a Carmelite monastery, an old monastery, about 10 years ago, I think now.
Oh, wow, okay.
And when Anna went up there, she, through various discussions, were invited for the competition for converting the Carmelite monastery into another site for the Clare House Children's Hospice.
Okay, amazing.
The charity does some amazing stuff. It's all to do with sort of end-of-life care, terminally ill kids from sort of very young to maybe teenage years.
Okay.
So the care is amazing. The staff, do some amazing work. But the site in West Derby is closer to the Alderhay Children's Hospice, for example, as well.
Right, okay.
So I think that's part of the strategically why they bought that site.
Yeah.
So we got invited, won the design competition, and we started sort of doing RIBA stage 1, 2 pre-pandemic. But obviously, as the pandemic hit, the requirement for how you may look after patients and kids, the interaction, the all of the lessons learned, I guess, from COVID means that we're going to start re-looking at the layouts in January.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that's the kind of work we're doing up there.
Oh, that's an amazing project. So just name check that charity again, and maybe we can put a link to it.
Yeah, so Clare House Children's Hospice. Amazing work they do.
Okay,
Definitely.
Amazing. So they're based in Liverpool.
They are. So like I said, the main site is in the Wirral, but they've, like I said, bought this site and are slowly looking to provide the same care, probably in a larger facility in the monastery building.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic project for us.
That sounds really good. So monastery must be a first, surely.
Yeah, exactly.
Your portfolio.
I'd never been into one, and the Carmelite order was a silent order. So once the nuns went in, I think they had 2 years to decide whether they wanted to stay in or come out.
Right, okay.
And some of the nuns had been there for like 50 years. So, and then I believe they got relocated to London. So they went in potentially before we went to the moon and came out after we've gone to the moon. And really, they would have not had that much interaction. So
that's quite incredible. Yeah, so they wouldn't have left the monastery over that period.
No, and they had very little physical contact. It was all through turntables to deliveries or those kind of things. So it's
it's a lot of history there.
Yeah, amazing building. So yeah, we were excited to kind of turn that. But this is obviously a slow burner, being a charity and all the medical requirements as well. So, but. Yeah, that's one project, but we want to continue doing things like the higher education, the life sciences, which we'll come on to later, and education and housing.
Yeah, so there's those opportunities for in other sectors as well in Liverpool?
I think so. I think Liverpool is sort of restructuring internally in terms of their planning department and just following sort of, the kind of new changes that have come into the city council and the region. So as far as we are aware, there's a lot of work that's still in the pipeline. Yeah. But I think it's a little bit slowed up in the planning process, for example, and the governance. So there's some large master plans already in place, and they can be activated. But again, I think it's just that kind of combination of funding, getting through the planning system, upskilling, the internal teams. So it is a bit of a slow burner, but you can see some amazing buildings coming up. And the master plans, both from a university, knowledge quarter, science kind of sector, and housing along the kind of the river and stuff. So hopefully, things will start to kind of ramp up a bit. Yeah, it's been a bit difficult, obviously, because of the COVID. And
then the new business in a new city for you guys, so that takes a bit of time as well to embed yourselves.
It does, and I think maybe some people think of us as four people with a new practice in Liverpool, but obviously we've got sort of 20, 25 years of design and delivery experience. So we've been getting, trying to push that measure a lot more. And obviously with the projects that we're physically delivering, it shows that we've got that capability. So it's just kind of changing maybe some of the mindsets of the people who we are meeting, or reinforcing the ability that we have as a practice. So as with anything, it's just getting out there.
So you and I have worked together for a number of years, I think more than we would like to talk about. Maybe 20 years, a long time. You were probably not far
at least
out of
15 years.
You were not far out of college, probably university.
Exactly, yeah.
So a long time. So I was thinking back, and obviously we discussed earlier about the BSF schemes, Building Schools for the Future schemes that we originally worked on, which probably was 15 years ago.
It is, because I think I started at DMA in 2007. And I think the St Augustine School that we work with for Westminster City Council alongside Boyd Construction, that was 2008, I think, or 9. Memory is fast fading, but it was
that does sound about right.
Yeah,
that does sound about right.
Yeah.
So they were ambitious projects. Looking back on it, there was obviously a lot of money spent on them, but really a building program for new schools that really was quite ambitious at the time. And as we said earlier, I've revisited some of those schools recently when they've been doing some rectification works. When I say recently, maybe the last five years. But looking back on it, they're ambitious schools. They've got really good spaces. They've got open plan breakout spaces, kind of ancillary spaces for students to do other bits and pieces. Much more kind of creative spaces than the kind of functional schools that we'd had before, that had come before that. When you guys pick those up, did you have that brief? Did you have that intention to kind of break away from the mould a little bit?
No, I mean, in a way, we were about 4 or 5 people in the team when we first started working with Boyd and Westminster City Council, and that was really on the back of some of the refurb elements of those master plans for those sites needed sort of bit more care, I guess, and a bit more sort of day-to-day resource because they were refurbs. So it's not like a new build element, which is draw, specify, and essentially construct.
Yes.
So that's where the combination that Westminster wanted in terms of combining SME, so small to medium enterprises, with the larger practices like Boyd, for example, meant that we got introduced. And that was, we first started working on the Marylebone High School, doing some small works there in terms of refurb. And then as that evolved, and as that evolved and our expertise evolved, then we were asked to kind of work on the larger, brand new buildings, which had sort of essentially got planning, or there were design schemes, but we worked for the contractor side on delivering them. So sometimes in hand with the the other architects who were working on the project, like St Augustine. So the Ange and Allen were doing the new build, and we worked obviously with yourselves in terms of looking at the fire, the refurb, the phased approach for, as you say, I think we had something like 12 or so phases in St Augustine's to be able to deliver the refurb in a live school. And I think we had like number of fire strategy iterations, which we worked again with yourselves to kind of realise. So really nitty-gritty projects for quite a young team. And that was really instrumental in us being able to bring the confidence to a large contractor that actually we could work well with them and the other design team. And in a way, that made us, we were, as I say, quite junior in terms of coming out of university or masters, but getting really nitty-gritty delivery experience.
Having to think the contractor as well, so actually delivering it rather than...
Exactly. So having to think about all the fire detailing, the acoustic detailing and the build-ups, looking at things like insulation U-value. So all the things that would sound quite sort of mundane, but actually, in hindsight, having done that, delivered that, worked on complicated multi-phase projects, it meant that when we came to design schools, we were able to kind of bring that experience to either knowingly develop a design that could be delivered or avoid sort of pitfalls that we'd seen from previous designs by others, for example. Amazing experience.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so a lot of cutting your teeth on some of those projects for sure. So as looking back on them now, there was SEN, real focus on SEN for those schools, both performances for individual rooms, which was really quite forward thinking then, strangely. And that's really set the standard from then in for new schools as they get built. Yeah. So it really was. So going back and revisiting them was quite eye opening actually, and looking back at what was happening then and how kind of forward thinking they were.
Agreed. I think there was probably maybe 6 major kind of projects. Things like as I mentioned, the SEN. So the QE2 Jubilee School, that was pure SEN. So having to kind of develop hydrotherapy pools, sensory rooms, again, dealing with the acoustics around all of that, whether it's reverberation or, impact, noise, etc. And again, with like George Eliot School, there was essentially 2 schools linked together. So dealing with fire separation and acoustics and aesthetics, so very different age groups. So that was, let's say, complicated and always in quite tricky sites, because in Westminster predominantly it was to do with conservation areas or adjacent to listed buildings. So the quality, the aesthetics, material choice all had to be really quite considered. It wasn't just an open site that you could put anything on. So that was, I say, complicated. And we just kind of got on with it, I think. As I look back and you kind of like go, actually, there was a junior team working on it, but it's, Anna, for example, who's the Liverpool director, she was there, Katie,
that's right, the
directors,
that's right,
Tom, we're all now, matured on, but hopefully feeding that knowledge back to the new team.
Yeah, that's right, that's what it's all about, isn't it? So at some stage along that, I went to Dubai to work, but you must have completed the work there, so you must have been working for several years on those schemes. Yeah,
I mean, I think the relationship with Westminster and then leading on to some other more projects outside of Westminster. So Tower Hamlets was the Oakland School, and then beyond after that we did Mayfield School, which is in London Borough Redbridge. Again, these are all schools that we did with Boyd, for example.
Yeah.
Some were part of the BSF and some were directly kind of funded by the local authorities, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that stretched for a good chunk, 5, 6, 7 years, I think.
Really, that long?
So, and that allowed the team to grow.
Yeah.
Like I said, when I started, there was 4 of us, and now, we're up to 25 or so. And we've kind of stayed that kind of number with all the various sort of ups and downs. Economically, and COVID, etc. So, yeah.
No, it's a great team. It is a great team. So this year in particular, DMA have been shortlisted and awarded a number of prizes. I've lost count how many, I must admit. And you guys must keep tabs of it. I think I joke that you need to get a bigger office just to put all your trophies in, because it's been a busy year for you guys winning awards. So all fully deserved shortlistings and awards. So the 2 that we can talk about that spring to mind, Parsons North, which we obviously worked with you on for many years, from stage 2 to stage 5, but that was over many years. Very successful this year, rightly so. Really, really good project in many, many ways. Why do you think that's been picked up? Obviously, there's a lot of residential schemes you work on and lots of residential schemes in London and beyond. Why do you think Parsons North has been such a success in the awards this year?
I mean, I think Parsons is a really interesting thing. I guess also from the beginning, because thinking in mind, it was on through the Westminster DPS framework, and we had to essentially select a team that we appointed. So I think there was something in the region of 13 consultants, specialist that we had as DMA had to appoint and generate our submission with to win that project in the first place. So that Westminster essentially had one point of contact for that whole project from essentially start to finish. And that to pull that team together, obviously we looked on people that we worked with, and whether it's also a combination of personalities, ethos, but also technology. So when we were working with, say, the structural and the M&E, it was very much about using BIM, building information modelling. When it came to fire and acoustics, obviously the history that we had together, and that relationship was the reason we, worked with you and put you as part of that team. And it's obviously led to a really great project and a great result.
Absolutely.
And that Parsons North scheme, like a lot of projects that we have now kind of done for Westminster, it's all part of their strategy to try and unlock sites to then re-provide or decant their residents into, to then be able to redevelop another site. So they're constantly kind of working in this cycle of having to demolish something but build something before, so that the residents can move into something first. And you're looking back over like 10 years, we've done feasibility studies for lots of sites which are now actually either on site or have now completed. So it's a huge kind of long game that the local authorities have to play. And Parsons North, a tricky site because it was essentially a sub-basement car park. But on a great location, Edgware Road, just
on the
by
road.
Paddington and Maida
great location.
So by the canal, and so really kind of an area where lots of things are going to happen. And working alongside yourselves in terms of both the fire and the acoustics, got to keep in mind that we were going through the planning period and when Grenfell happened as well. So and the scheme is next to a 20-story reclad project from historically. The cladding was not of the nature in terms of Grenfell, but so it was a really sensitive time in terms of going through the resident stakeholder meetings, literally a couple of days after Grenfell happened, and then Westminster taking a really enlightened view to introduce sprinklers and changing all the insulation and stuff to non-combustible minerals. Again, with your input, we were able to redesign the apartments to be sprinklered, which in a way really kind of helped the scheme, because in hindsight, because we were able to make some of the flats more open plan, use some of that lobby space for things like en suites, because the Parsons North scheme is essentially 60 homes, and part of it is private sale, just for the listeners, I guess. So part of it, 41 for private sale, which then cross-funded the 19 affordable social rent. but also funded additional work around Parsons House Tower. So in order to, as tragic as Grenfell happened, it then allowed us to kind of, Westminster, like I said, before any legislation, BSA, any of that came into play, they took a great decision and said, look, let's sprinkler. We don't know what's going to happen. Let's make sure everything is kind of non-combustible.
Absolutely.
But that generated, I think, more revenue from the private sale because they had things like en-suites and more generous kind of spaces, which then ultimately helped the local residents and allowed us to re-landscape all the area, bring in a community centre, a community room into the bottom of Parsons North. So much more wider. So I think that's why it's been a really successful project, both from for Westminster, the residents, but also just from a kind of a acknowledgement point of view, because we took a site, we maximised it in terms of how many homes we could get in, reacted to the tragic events, and have ensured that the scheme is tenure blind, so both the affordable and the private tenants are enjoying their private courtyard.
Yeah.
The local residents next door are, kind of given a really nice re-landscaped area. The community room is an added bonus, really. So I think that's why it's gone down really well. Very good quality materials in terms of, facing brickwork, stonework, metal, architectural metalwork, all of really high quality. So it should stand the test of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And, I think kind of completes that kind of Edgware Road transition between Westminster and the Maida Vale and north to St John's Wood.
Yeah, 100% agree with everything you've said. I think Westminster Council made some really good decisions around that time, forward-thinking decisions, if you look at what happened, the changes to regulations years after, actually.
Yeah.
So they made some really sensible decisions then for absolutely the right reasons, and the project's better for it.
I agree.
Architecturally, it looks great. It looks a really practical, functional building for what it is. It's not ostentatious. Sits really well on the streetscape there, as you said, and really does add to Westminster. Social housing bit, I think personally, was retained throughout.
Yeah.
And the numbers that were proposed to start with, I think, ended up being incorporated.
Exactly.
Which makes a difference, I think, with a building for a council rather than maybe private developers.
Yeah.
And I think, it's a really successful
thank
scheme.
You. And like I said, it's all part of that big team that we talked about. So, we appointed that team all the way to planning, and we got that very quickly, using a combination of the tools, the digital tools to kind of stakeholder engagements with local authorities, residents, but also in terms of just getting this massing approved at early stages with the planners and stuff. So I think that success was, I think we only took like 6 months to get it into planning from a standing start. But I think also the inspection role that yourselves had in terms of the EWS1 forms and the cladding with the contractor was really, again, sort of leading the way.
Yeah,
because now it's common, and you've obviously done the same role on other schemes that we just completed, like the Causeway Ashbridge Ashmill combination. So that's and then we've learned some of those lessons from that and applied it to the other infill projects that we took to planning and got planning, which is for the Adpar, the Torridon, and the Queen's Park Estate. So really 7 schemes have been designed, developed, and delivered with residents now, living in them over the last sort of 2017, I think, is when we started Parsons. So in the last,
was it really?
Yeah,
okay.
so like sort of 7 years.
7 years,
but we've delivered something like 7 brand new schemes. I think that's something like 200 homes, and I think it was something like £100 million of spend, 50% affordable across all of those things. So
it's incredible.
That's a great example of how we've learned together. And Westminster being really proactive and a really good, visionary client.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all that. So, it was a good scheme to work on. The design team was great, as you said. I think that collaboration with design team members really, really helps a successful project as well. And when you have an ambitious, kind of forward-thinking as it was then, client as well, that combination is really quite powerful, and it's worked out a really good project and fully deserved the accolades it's had this year, for sure.
No, fingers crossed. And then, like I said, it's just a nice thing to know. I mean, when you get resident feedback or the Westminster Estates Management feedback, and they're positive, and all the way up the top of the Westminster, teams, that's really nice. And then to kind of get it seconded, I guess that's always very nice as well.
Yeah.
But main thing is, as far as we know, the residents are happy, they're kind of warm and safe. So that's the main thing.
That is the main thing. So also, obviously, Geoffrey Osborne contractors delivered it as well through the last stages of stage 5. So once again, they good contractor. They came in and made the right decisions as we went along as well. Worked really well with Westminster. So add them into the design team as well, or the implementation team.
Exactly, and that's who we then won the kind of the AAC projects with. So which just completed as well, and that was a really interesting arrangement with Westminster about cross funding. So with trying to get the numbers to add up, we were again able to help, especially on Parsons, because we had to employ the quantity surveyor up to planning, and again we'll come on to, I guess, the use of technology, but making sure that the schemes. Choice of materials were costed at a much higher level of granularity because of the models and the digital tools, meant that the financial kind of platform for being able to deliver that was checked at each of the stages. So you didn't get a scheme that was unaffordable, had planning, and then had to go into a huge VE exercise. Obviously, we can't kind of tailor for changes in global market issues.
Yeah, of course,
in terms of numbers, areas, material choices, etc., that was really, again, a positive of using knowledge, technology, and the sort of open book kind of analysis.
Absolutely. Yeah, successful round. So another really successful project. Another one that springs to mind that's really been successful in the awards this year is Crosfields School.
Yeah.
So different scale, different sector, great looking school from architectural perspective, has all the internal requirements that a primary school, it's a primary school, isn't it? Primary school needs inside.
Actually, I think for the 13 to 16 or 13 to 18 year group.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's an add-on to the existing estate. Yeah.
Okay, so it's got all those things that are needed inside the school, but externally looks incredible for a school of that scale. So once again, deserved accolades. CDC worked with you through that as well from beginning to completion. So that was really good to see it through. But once again, what do you think the success for the awards came from for that project?
So again, a design competition that we were invited to submit, and we work with the Department for Education as technical advisors. So it's a combination of they have very strict sort of schedules of accommodation, because funding is based on the areas. Now, Crosfield was a private school, so they didn't necessarily were constrained by those areas and those things, so they had their own preferences, but no doubt they still have a budget. So the combination of our submission was to do with giving that accommodation that they needed, being sensible with it and efficient, but also working around the landscape of the kind of the trees and the mature trees on the site. So the design kind of evolved really from that, and then the choice of materials, use of cross-laminated timber, which it's kind of controversial, one might say, or risky, some people say. But again, I think that's where the way the building sits, the school are really interested in sustainability, showcasing that, using every means possible to generate that. So CLT made a sensible use of in that particular instance. Great kind of material to kind of, I think there's tests proven to reduce heart rates, improve wellness, etc. Which in a busy school environment is really helpful. And so that timber is reflected internally and externally. But, again, with your input and expertise on the fire side and the acoustics, because, we had things like drama or performing areas right next to classrooms and double height and stuff. So
I remember well.
And, we had worked on CLT school, Mayfield School before, but that was a number of years ago. And the requirements now for, with post-Grenfell again, use of CLT was could only be done with, for example, your expert knowledge on the fire cladding of it, the fire rating, in association with achieving the high acoustic values that we needed, but still wanting to be able to keep some of the CLT exposed. So it's really kind of picking, not your battles, but picking your areas carefully.
No, you're right,
Can it be done technically? Okay, yes, it's not too onerous to do that. Let's do that so that we preserve that warmthness, but still meet the regulatory requirements. So I think overall, again, really important kind of stakeholders, great client. They knew what they wanted. They were very clear. And I think whenever you get a client who's really interested. They don't necessarily have to be experts, but interested. They're very clear in terms of what they want, make clear decisions. And then you've got a team and a contractor who are all aligned. You kind of get a good project. And I think that, that's why we've been lucky enough to kind of be shortlisted and won a couple of awards as well.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely well deserved. So some of the images that we've got of that school, we use it for marketing. It's on our brochures, it's on the website, it's front and centre for a lot of the stuff we put out. So it's a very good looking project. CLT always comes with compromises. I think if that's accepted from the design team, architects and the client, that okay, you can have exposed, maybe can't have it all exposed.
Yeah.
And it's getting to that point where everybody's satisfied with where it ends up.
I think we learned a lot from Mayfield School many years ago in terms of the benefits and the negatives of CLT, acoustics, thermal mass, those kind of things. But there are so many positives. But obviously the kind of industry is trying to still work through the regulatory stuff. Yeah,
I think it's possible to use. Its test data is still quite limited and quite poor. So that still needs to improve a lot. But the use of it, obviously, net zero, sustainability targets, it's really, really, really positive. It's just making sure that all the other information that's required for CLT is available. And then it's hopefully good to go in certain scenarios. So a school is one of those, low-rise school is and could be one of those. So
no, that's true.
Long may the use of it last, really. So really, really good project. Again, good design team, like you said. I think it was Beard Construction, wasn't it, that put it together. So good contracting as well. They were really on top of it, pushing hard to get it delivered on time, as I remember, which is their job, obviously.
Well, with a school program or a timetable, there are those hard stops,
those deadlines. That's correct.
End of a summer holiday or Christmas break, or all those kind of things. But I think one thing I want to touch on, I guess, is I think we've sort of evolved over the years about things like fire strategies and how do we best communicate the requirements. And now that we have the tools, i.e. the three-dimensional tools, I know we've talked earlier about how can we represent the requirements, especially when you've got complicated sectional buildings or designs of buildings sectionally, which are not just stacked and viewing in plan. So that's something we can obviously touch upon later as well.
So other projects you're working on, so education and residential, obviously you guys are really well known. But more recently you've been working heavily in life sciences. So you've found a name and a place for yourself in life sciences. So talk us through that, how that came about and the sorts of buildings you've been working on.
So a great sector. That, again, I think just shows you the importance of, I think as a team, the relationship we build over time, good relationships personally with team members. So the life science client is called Cadans, who are based from in Netherlands, and they're sort of investing in the UK, across the UK, in fact. So everything from Glasgow, Manchester, Liverpool, looking hopefully in Liverpool, London, and then sort of Canary Wharf as well, more specifically. So, and that came through from a project manager who used to work for a housing client. So that we did a number of, I think about 12 or 13 residential projects in and around London. And that gentleman had sort of moved across organisations, ended up at Cadans and needed a sort of feasibility done. And he knew that we were able to do that and had done many for him previously. So that was really the connection, as I say, the historical relationship, not because we had any knowledge or experience in that in the life science sector. Although obviously, a lot of work we've done with offices. So we've worked with like WeWork and labs, who have got some similar spaces.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover, definitely.
And schools which have got obviously an element of like the science labs and so on and so forth. Different level and quality, but ultimately similar kind of backbones. So that's how it came through, and it's been fantastic. So we're working on essentially sort of 4 at the moment. One was a fit out of a project in Canary Wharf called Water Street, which is now complete, and that really gave us a really nice insight into the latter finishes and the quality that Cadans are looking for. They do essentially life sciences, which are buildings which are speculative. So in a way, it's a bit like a WeWork, where they create buildings which have got a certain percentage, either 50 or 60% labs, which are for wet or dry labs, and the other element of it for write-ups and office spaces.
Okay.
So it's on that level, very simple kind of model, but all the facilities in terms of M&E kit, extraction, gases, goods lifts, all of that is kind of provided, so you can tap in and they like to create like a essentially a little ecosystem, or a campus, and that's exactly what we're doing just north of King's Cross, is enabling their potential tenants, whether it's a startup or a kickstart or incubator kind of use, as they grow, to then just take space within that particular building or in an adjacent building, because it might have it's larger spaces, for example. So that's sort of the general model. So the first project we're working on is on 5 to 10 Brandon Road. That already had consent for a scheme, but not a life science. So we then went in, resubmitted it to make it more suitable in terms of plant or layout, etc. So that will be completed, and Morgan Sindall are the main contractor on that. And so that'll be completed in March 2024.
Okay, congratulations.
No, I mean, so that's coming on really nicely. And then next door, there's 4 Brandon Road, which has just got planning unanimously, which is fantastic last week. And then there's 18 to 20 Thailand, which is right next door as well. So it's really great to kind of learn from one to the other. And that team is also working across. So Morgan Sindall will continue, I think, bid and won working on 4. And the design team, again, are sort of being retained so that we can evolve our learning and lessons and so on and so forth. So great sector. And that's one thing which is also, as I said, across the country. So if we're looking to work with maybe Manchester and other life science clients in the north as well, because Anna, for example, she's leading on a couple of these projects already. So between herself and myself, we've got quite a lot of knowledge and the in the sector physically up there as well. So yeah, we see that as a great sector to be involved in. So yeah, no, fantastic.
Yeah, so a lot of growth there, and you've obviously got an established northern office now. So to pick up on the so a lot of the focus is on Cambridge and Oxford, obviously in the area there, and into London. But actually, there's loads of expansion possible in the north as well.
No, I mean, we went to a place northwest, labs of the future kind of seminar in Manchester, and it was interesting because different cities along the northern, let's say, sort of area, whether it's Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool, they're looking to potentially specialise in particular areas. So Liverpool's historically always been good for tropical diseases. You know, Liverpool's, the School of Tropical Medicine.
Okay.
So vaccines are potentially what the life science sector or the organisations may or may not want to kind of specialise in that.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas Newcastle is known for sort of more the ageing population and the research they're doing on that.
Oh, amazing.
So rather than competing with each other, actually complement each other regionally, and that seems to be the general consensus, that let London and the Golden Triangle do what it's good at doing and the connectivity, but actually got a huge population as people who could also kind of do the testing, proof of theory and so on and so forth. So, it's something we really want to kind of be pushing on, and I think we're well placed
absolutely.
now.
So as we've said, London and the Golden Triangle, as you said, is the one that's often talked about, but plenty of opportunities further north for growth. Like you said, some really, really good expertise up there.
Exactly.
And with that will come the life sciences buildings and the work and the expansion.
Big hospitals, big sort of universities up there. So it's really got a graduate scheme plus the clinical trials and everything can be done in the area rather than having to kind of shuttle around. So then there are some really, like I said, really interesting positives. And interesting, I guess, also from things like we're learning about fire and acoustics, because in a lot of the buildings you're worried about fire breaking out from the labs. So you're kind of inside to outside protection rather than necessarily on a lot of buildings you might be protecting from outside in. So there's different ways that we've learned about how do you manage that. Obviously, there's acoustics are very important in terms of sensitive maybe discussions.
That's right, vibration tolerances as well.
That's a huge thing in terms of working along with the structural engineers to get that right for the very sensitive equipment. So, we're kind of building on the experience with people like Bureau Happel, who've kind of written a lot of those technical things. With Rambo, doing a lot, and we work with them on Mayfield and stuff. So, really good kind of partners that we've worked with before, but are also working in that sector across the country. So I think we've got a really good network of consultants and clients that we can then tap in and kind of collaborate with.
Great. So they also look, because they're private developers, they also normally quite well funded. They always look quite futuristic. They've always got a very modern kind of look to them, which is great for you guys to work on. Really good, architecturally, really good projects to work on. Quite ambitious visually.
I mean, I think really happy with the schemes that we've developed from stage 0. For Brandon Road, you've got planning, the 1820 tile yard, which is just about to go into planning. They're really tricky tights because they're essentially landlocked apart from maybe one side, which provides the access.
Right,
so you're trying to having to articulate, especially ground floor, to deal with substations, plant, access, loading bays, everything, but also create something which is active.
Yeah.
So we've kind of combined the need for light industrial use in the area, which is part of the kind of wider master planning requirement, but trying to then also make sure that all the services are accessible, but articulate that bits of the facade, and the other ones higher up to get daylight for obviously the kind of labs to kind of reduce maybe the energy consumption. So really nice balance, but I think we've got some really quite striking buildings which together are giving our client Cadans anyway, at this moment in time, a nice set of buildings which are distinct to them, but not copy and paste. So they are articulated for that particular area. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the images I've seen, they look great. They're very, very good. So good work on that. Long may that continue.
Yeah, no,
it's definitely a growing sector. Continues to grow. So I think you're well placed to pick up lots of that work.
Hopefully, and yeah, it's been great so far. So
yeah, good. So we can't talk about DMA without talking about BIM.
Yeah.
So you guys have been leaders in that field, and you specifically have been obviously lots of conference speaking and this kind of stuff. So where to start? Where did you guys pick up, and what stage did you take leadership on that and the importance of it for you?
I think David, when I first started, David was also already thinking about one sort of platform that could generate everything from a concept design to technical and delivery.
Yeah.
When I started, we were using a combination of 2D AutoCAD for technical drawings, and then maybe things like Rhino for 3-dimensional. But even in a small team,
so that was 2007.
Yeah, exactly. And even that, you had the disconnect because what was generating the 3D didn't match the 2D. Simple, misalignment of information. And you couldn't have that when you're getting to larger schemes. So David was already, when I joined, talking to people he knew, people at Arab and stuff, because he'd worked with them on sort of the media centre at Lord's Cricket Ground. So the intel was go with something like Revit. But again, it was way before building information modelling or better information management, as is now more commonly referred to, became a buzzword. Dave was really interested in just making sure we had something that we could generate good quality, efficient, coordinated information. So we started on that on a £1 million project, actually, Hercules Place, and that was productive because even though we were quite new, and we did manage to get good efficiencies. And the quality was good, and we did it.
And was it just you guys, just DMA working on it in BIM? The rest of the design team, not so?
No, I mean, we sort of referred to as Lonely BIM at that moment, at that time. So the first part of that was Lonely BIM, but it generated good quality outputs for us.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Dave was very keen, and along with Fiona, we're going to promote our experience because actually the more people who are using the tools, M&E, structures, landscape, the better it is for us as well in terms of coordination. So we didn't feel we didn't have to hide it or be a secret. So David and Fiona were very keen on getting the message out, being involved in the discussions, being involved in discussions about managing the content or legal discussions about what happens if you share the model. But so really engaging with it as opposed to just sort of saying we're not interested. I say Dave's really always been interested in 3-dimensional designs from his days at Foster's, Calatrava and Future Systems, but also in terms of making sure the quality of the output is really, really good, high quality. And digital tools, workflows was where it came from. So, and then fast forward, I think 2010, we decided to use building information model Revit on all projects, refurb, new build, little or large. And that's when things like, I think 2011, 12, contractually, clients were asking for BIM level 2 and data to be outputted for handover.
Yeah.
So having been ahead of the curve, I guess, in many ways, and being at conference and investing that time, we saw the benefits because, again, David and Fiona were doing the metrics in terms of expenditure, fee incoming. And for the first couple of years, it was sort of, they were all parallel, so there was no marginal difference. But then after we had got a little bit better skilled in using the tools, then we started to see that the incoming fees were moving away from the parallel. They weren't parallel anymore in terms of training and cost. So that the income generator was good. And since then, it's been kind of business as normal, usual. And then, as I say, when you get to the kind of collaborative and then the contractual BIM, and now with all the Building Safety Act and the Golden Thread, it's we're easily able to kind of demonstrate that to many of the stages, all the way up through to construction handover. Yeah. So in hindsight, it was a great decision.
Yeah, that's right.
Led by David and Fiona, and top down, which is much easier than bottom up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that bit of leadership comes from the top.
Yeah.
So I remember when I went to Dubai, I guess early 2000, certainly pre-2007, and everybody was using BIM. I mean, every project that I worked on was delivered in BIM. Yeah. And it was only when I came back to the UK sometime after that really wasn't picked up in the UK. Like I said, there was very few companies, yourself being one, DMA being one, that were using it. And it really wasn't big at all. No. It wasn't really being spoke about. It certainly wasn't a client requirement on projects until much later, as you just said. So the difference was quite stark, actually, that the Middle East had picked it up and were using it almost without question. Yeah. And that goes for all the architects that are working on the projects. And to come to the UK, and it was still pretty much, I think the council had mandated, I can't remember the date, but they'd mandated a year that everything should be designed in BIM. That came and went without fanfare, and certainly without any BIM projects. Well, some maybe, but definitely not all of them, which was the requirement. Yeah. So, and it did, like you say, it took a while to actually be something that clients ask for, and it's a requirement on tenders. So you were talking at 2010 plus.
I think so. And I think, but I think the benefit, or not the benefit, the advantage that the UK government, in terms of having the various kind of organisations looking at it in-depthly, both from a legal, processes, standards, I think it's fair to say that the standards that we have and the suite of documents, whether they're PAS or ISO now, are ISOs, international standards, because they are considered across the world as being exemplar. Yeah. So that's, I agree. I think it seems like it was a slow burner, but actually it was done in quite a structured way. And ultimately BIM is all about structure and classifications and standards. True. It just shows you that actually the public available standards, the PASs, have now evolved to the ISOs. So that is good, because that is now an export, really. So I think a lot of countries and regions around the world, and David's again spoken at different, has been invited to different countries to speak, is because actually the UK have got that framework in right. Sometimes it's annoying in terms of figuring out the acronyms and stuff, but ultimately the kind of classification, the methods, the naming structure, everything sort of works from small to large projects. So that's really beneficial. Yeah,
that's great. That is great. So you being so close to it and DMA being so close to it, I'm really interested to know where you think it's going. Obviously the impact of AI on potentially BIM modelling or modelling generally, and general technology development, where you see that going. Also Desk obviously investing heavily in AI use on their modelling suites. But just interested in your view on that, as you're so close to it.
Got to say, we haven't really. So we got we set an R&D team within the office. So my role is really spread across more the technical. I'm sort of technical director, but also leading the R&D team. Yeah. But that's really headed up by a colleague, Andy Wood. And then also within my remit is looking at things like the CDM, health and safety, but also the Building Safety Act. So it's that kind of region of the office. But Andy's very keen on, he's always exploring different tools, but we're kind of quite, we're wanting to keep the suite of tools small, only because otherwise everything gets a bit disparate. Yeah. So in reality, we use Revit for pretty much 99% of our output and delivery.
Yeah.
From stage 0 to handover, and things like the Kobe data sets for the FM teams to use. So that's all been generated in Revit. We're also using things like Notion, which is a platform to kind of host our kind of trackers, our task information delivery plans, all of those things. But then things like Enscape for doing renders and digital, which obviously now AI is coming into. But and MBS Chorus is the other kind of main component, because that is allowing us to link digitally and audit digitally the specification link to our models. And so we've not really pushed AI in terms of looking at design, I would say, but we have used it in terms of looking at the ability for it to scan documents like building regulations and generate a checklist that we can then work through depending on a particular package, let's say, that we're working on. So we're kind of using it as an aid memoir at the moment anyway into what we're building in. And the team are essentially building content library. So the R&D team, we employ team members from the Middlesex University who do the BIM technologist course, something that Dave actually helped set up. But it's been really great because they're coming in with a bit more of a broader understanding of things like sustainability, BREEAM, Revit, Navisworks, clash detection. But they are sometimes interested in the information side, and sometimes more design, or both. So that team is basically building content that we know is audited, whether it's a bathroom, Part M, accessibility compliant, or a kitchen or a bedroom. And we're feeding those components into our projects.
Great.
So we haven't used AI in terms of visualizations, let's say, and creating. Can you create a housing scheme that looks like this?
No, but it's embedded in what you do. And I think that will be the way forward for a period of time, where it will be embedded in the programs you use. They'll get better at doing what they do. And it will become part of the course as BIM did over the years, I think.
It is, and
it'll be something you use without thinking.
Our approach has always been incremental improvements, do little things, and that's come from, like the black box thinking kind of notion and the book. So rather than huge steps, let's slowly work through things systematically, get the components and the quality embedded, and make sure there's enough sort of prompts and checklists so everyone works through them still. Because to again further maintain the golden thread, whether it's whichever project, but also make sure we haven't missed anything, because it's getting quite complicated in terms of trying to remember everything that you're meant to comply with.
Indeed. There's some challenges for the industry going forward in the next few years, I think. And getting it right. Good outcomes at the end of it, but I think it's a challenging few months, years ahead.
Definitely.
To get everything in order.
Definitely. Well, I was just coming on to that thing about the, how can we, improve? I think we quite wanting to kind of feed back to other consultants, contractors, clients. And I think the conversation we've had is about the fire and acoustic strategies, because buildings aren't simply plan anymore. Because they don't just stack up. There's cantilevers, overhangs, voids. In section, there are different users groups.
Absolutely.
You're having to kind of actually see the design in 3D.
Absolutely.
And I know we talked to and we trialed it out on like the infills projects about actually generating markups from our model, where you could take the sections, you bring it into your software, you take the sections and actually color code the the compartmental lines, not just in an SEO PDF markup, but actually physically onto the digital model. So that should reduce ambiguity, interpretation, mainly because things like the fire and acoustic are quite technical.
That's right.
Even in their units,
they definitely
and
can be.
Measurements and stuff.
Absolutely. So I think so that is the next steps. Obviously accepted that BIM models are delivered by the main disciplines, the structures, M&E. And the architects. It's the specialists, which those services become increasingly important, as we spoke about earlier. But at the moment, they're still reports and 2D drawings, and the expectation is that it's quite basic output, really. And that's where you get errors creep in and things are misinterpreted in reports, and the usual kind of ways that mistakes are made. So the way to get rid of that is bring the whole design into BIM rather than the architects expected to interpret whatever's in the report, the fire report, the acoustic report, whatever report it might be.
Yeah.
To issue that BIM pack as a specialist consultancy, rather than expecting the design team to do it. So I think that is the next phase.
Yeah.
Has to be the next phase.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things which is an easy win of using the technology to sort of exponentially improve clarity, where actually for yourselves from acoustic consultants and fire specifically don't actually have to create anything. You're just using the slicing tool, let's say in Revit, to take a number of sections to then mark up.
That's true.
So there's no point in sort of making someone buy lots of software and then saying, well, can you do on this? Because that's not going to happen. Whereas actually, by using simply our model and you viewing it and then marking up, that doesn't cost anyone in time, but it actually could save quite a lot of issues when further down the line.
It's reducing the ambiguity, reduces the risk. I think it has to be the way
actually
for the industry.
More money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just working a little bit smarter, isn't it? So that's all really good.
Yeah.
Really good to chat. I think that's been an hour already, so we've whittled through that. Thanks for your time.
No.
Coming up to Christmas, bumping up to Christmas holidays, you're just about to go on leave, I understand?
Yeah, I'm quite lucky actually. So heading off to Sri Lanka. I'm from Sri Lanka, kind of grew up a little bit there, did my year out actually. So looking forward to just a bit of a tropical holiday, a bit half maybe monsoony, half more drier.
Okay, I'd say it's monsoony here, so it's going to be no different.
So I look forward to that, and there's some nice architecture. I think we spoke about that.
Geoffrey
Bawa.
That's right. Yeah,
so I did my year out with a gentleman who worked with him directly.
Oh, really?
In his practice.
Okay,
so
incredible.
Got some really interesting stories out of that. But beautiful sort of tropical modernism is sort of the Geoffrey Bawa.
Tropical modernism. I like it.
Yeah, because Ulrich Plesner, who was the practice was set up between Ulrich and Geoffrey. Right. Ulrich Plesner was Danish.
Right. Okay.
So you had a very sensible modernist element.
Right.
With all of the kind of learnings from the British, the ancient sort of Sri Lankan architecture of the kind of the kings gone by, the Portuguese, the kind of Dutch. So real mix of sort of modernism, but not sort of boring, let's say. Nice materials and colours and stuff and plants. So I look forward to showing a little bit of that as well, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, we spoke about before, we visited Sri Lanka and we spent quite a long time in Colombo looking around Geoffrey Bawa buildings, actually. We stumbled upon one and went around looking around the city for plenty more. Yeah. So I remember that clearly, looking around those and being impressed by them.
No, it's an interesting, it was him and his brother Bavis Bawa, who he was a landscape architect. Huge kind of tall men, both of them. But it's interesting how, they've sort of, he had actually studied to be a lawyer and then retrained in the architectural association. He really set the tone both in Sri Lanka and the southeast predominantly. So the building's still there, and really you can go and actually stay in Geoffrey Bawa's house if you wanted.
Oh, can you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like £100 or something. So beautiful kind of artwork around. Really interesting time. Look forward to it.
Yeah, have a good holiday.
Yeah,
and a good Christmas.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can catch up again, maybe do something similar sometime in the future and revisit some of the things we've said and look at how you're doing in life sciences.
Yes, exactly.
And pick it up again. That'd be really useful for us.
Talk about some, hopefully some other projects which are award-winning and
absolutely.
More importantly,
undoubtedly
fun delivering. So.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for your time, Das.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll speak soon.
Cheers.
Thank you.